And this morning, I would like us to speak to a subject that I have titled, Because You Spoke. Yeah, because you spoke. You know, there is a popular parlance where we say that everything after the but is bullshit. That's when you say, oh, I like the guy, or I like the girl, or I like the business proposal, or it's not a bad idea, but once you say but, more often than not, that's the end of what you were busy eulogizing just before. You were just about to start tearing down whatever that thing might be. So we came up with it that time. Said, okay, so everything after the but is bullshit. But I didn't say but, you spoke. Nah, I said because you spoke. This phrase for me came up, I believe the first time it came up was when I gave my first lecture upon release from my holiday in Ekiti prison. As I had something entirely different prepared to deliver that morning, but I found myself overwhelmed because I came to the realization that even though the proverb that anchored my prepared sermon, I was completely correct in my original translation or interpretation, but my situation was a little too unique for me to have appropriated some self-glorification. Let me explain. The anchor verse for my message that morning was a Yoruba proverb that says, Emu eki bi terun reko. Properly translated, that proverb is saying that you do not grab a porcupine in the same manner in which you would grab a rabbit. In grabbing a rabbit, you need not be careful with the quills, the spikes on it. You had no problem with that. It's just a soft-bodied animal, so you grab it all fluffy and everything, and you come to no harm. But when you grab a porcupine with all the spikes and quills, you're definitely going to be horribly injured. Now, the first time I used this proverb was when I was in the bus of my abductors heading to Ekiti, because I understood clearly that I had the hammer of truth all over me and that I was going to end up unscathed. But here is the issue. By the time I wanted to use that proverb again in my sermon that morning, I came to the realization of the fact that actually the only reason my case was any different from that of the average Nigerian and why it turned out the way it did turn out is because you spoke. It has very little to do with me as a person. Nigeria has dealt with better men than myself. I found out in prison, and I'll deal with that some other time. I'll write that memoir at some other time. But I found whilst I was in prison that there are by far better human beings than myself who are inside the Nigerian prison system. I found that Nigeria has victimized and successfully dealt with better men than myself. Better resourced persons than myself have been dealt with by Nigeria. Nigeria has killed better men. Nigeria has destroyed better men. Nigeria has wrongly incarcerated better men. There is nothing about me that should make my case any different from that of those who have come before me. But you spoke. And it was the realization that you found the capacity to speak that made me lose control of my emotions. You spoke. So yeah, because you spoke. What is the use of because here? It's a conjunction. It's the explanation for the exception. For the reason that you spoke. Yorubas will say that àìlè sọ̀rọ̀ ó ní ìbẹ̀rẹ̀ orí burúkú. Let me repeat myself. Àìlè sọ̀rọ̀ ó ní ìbẹ̀rẹ̀ orí burúkú. The inability to speak to your condition is the beginning of ruination. You must be able to speak to your condition for that condition to change. I have had occasion to speak to the subject when I said talk is not cheap. Talk is not cheap. Never ever say that talk is cheap. Talk is the beginning of the articulation of your thoughts and the beginning of the likelihood of you acting to effect changes to your condition and your situation. So talk you must. And yes, you spoke. If an individual's refusal to speak to his condition dooms him to ruination, what do you think happens when a collective ignores to speak to their condition? That is the picture you see all over Nigeria today. But in my case, you spoke. You spoke. You carried no guns. The states and my abductors had the guns. But you spoke. You refused to make peace with the evil you saw unfolding before you. You spoke. You spoke. And it is important that we do not ever give up on speaking, however difficult or costly speaking might be, on the condition that you speak the truth. Truth is the only bullet by which you may kill the evil system that rules or ruins Nigeria. But the truth you know that you do not speak. You stand behind the pulpit of God and you speak lies and palliatives. Maybe I should say lies and palliatives. Behind the pulpit of God where you are called to speak the truth. Of what use are your speakings? But you spoke. You spoke in many ways. This generation lives virtually. I'm little known to the average man on the street. But if you're here, you likely knew me before my victimization, at least the one in the public space. But we became one. In me, you could express your victimhood. You knew that if it could happen to me, it could happen to you. You knew that it had happened to you and you could not be hurt. So vicariously, I became you. You became me. You became related to me and you spoke. You spoke. How did you speak? You spoke online. You spoke so loudly that I heard you even in prison, in my fellow prisoners. I heard you in prison officers. I heard you in court officers. I heard you because you spoke. You did not allow yourselves to be distracted. I'd already explained this, but it's critical that you understand it. My ethnicity did not matter. You did not let that count for anything. My religion or lack of it counted for nothing. You did not allow them any of those many things that usually divide us. You did not allow it to divide you. You spoke. We must find the capacity to speak even more as we face the challenges of Nigeria. The unity of purpose that was found in that season, I heard you, and I mean this. I had no access to social media. I had no way of knowing what all of you were doing. I haven't even begun to catch up with the kind of, even my phones. I've not caught up with the messages. Persons who I've taken a lot of friends for granted because I'm still busy saying thanks to the ones I never expected to speak. Afenifere spoke. My brothers in Take It Back movement spoke. Average Joe spoke. You all spoke. Even my favorite punching bag, Aremu, he spoke. At least I heard. Different persons whom I never would have expected offers of help from offered help. You spoke. Bridges over deep chasms were built. The usual hatred that would divide did not divide. And yes, partisanship did not count for anything. But there is a question that I have been asked, and that is relevant to the last part of my immediate submission, where I said partisanship counted for nothing. That's not completely true now, is it? It did count for something for those who would subjectify the truth. When truth becomes subjectified, it then means that the person who is speaking the truth, the subject about which the truth is being spoken, the person about whom the truth is being spoken, or whose interest the truth might affect, colors your interpretation of the truth. A lot of people jumped on the bandwagon simply because they don't like what they perceive as my politics. So they succumbed to the most basic of human idiocies outside of our bigotries. They believe that their enemy's enemy is their friend. Maybe, maybe not. But what it does do is that it takes away your capacity to reason without subjectivizing the truth. I did try very deliberately before I was picked up to decouple the Baptists. I didn't say the Baptists. I said the Baptists. I tried to decouple them from my abductors. In the press conference that I held the day before my abduction, I was very deliberate in saying that I did not believe that Tinubu is directly involved in what was going to happen to me. That was very deliberate. And it is also largely true. Tinubu did not need to be directly involved. The character of the person in the office of the presidency is completely irrelevant to the nature of the power exercised within the Nigerian state. If I had perhaps been a child of the system, a beneficiary of the system would have had occasion to pause before it would allow itself to be deployed against me. But it wasn't about persons, it is about a system. The totality of my preoccupation and my life work is not focused on persons. It is focused entirely on the evil system that has allowed persons to rule or act with impunity. Let us be clear. It's about the system. It is not about the person. But if I had allowed you to focus on persons, partisanship would have divided the solidarity that was developed in that season. And this is how I want us to understand the point, because this is where I'm going with this. If we must speak in a manner that resonates down the age, but not only down the ages, but even up and down the country, we must speak truth dispassionately, without ethno-religious blinkers, and devoid of partisanship. If we can do that, it becomes compelling for our voices as a collective to be heard. I am saying this because we must understand very quickly that Nigeria is not going to be saved by Voltrons. No. The lesson learned from those who have come before is the fact that Voltrons cannot save Nigeria. It will require us as a collective speaking and then acting together as one. Because if we do not speak, because if we do not act, our children will inherit a worse situation than the one in which we have found ourselves. It has taken our collective to bring us to this sorry pass, and it will require our collective to bring us out of this sorry pass. If we must come out of this sorry pass devoid of violence, the only path immediately in front of us is the electoral path. But that electoral path is useless if we have not acted, clearly understanding the commonalities of our affliction, and acted long before the election of 2027 to ensure that our votes would count, so that our voices would be heard, so that we might freely express our will as citizens under the law. We must act to demand reforms to the Electoral Act. The power of the collective is stronger than any solos. I could sing a good solo, yeah, pride myself on something of a good singer. Yeah, so whether you believe it or not, I was part of the children's choir at First Baptist Church, Idikon. Yes, that is in Olinde. I know, Idikon in Ibadan. And I still occasionally afflict my household when I'm in the shower. But I do know that there is a limit to what a person might do singing alone. But when it becomes a chorus, such as your voices became when you spoke, it becomes easier to get your voices to be heard when you become a collective. A chorus is louder than the solo. We've had enough soloists. We've sang enough solos in Nigeria. We've sung solos forever. It is time to begin to speak to the commonalities of the issues besetting us. There was a different outcome because you spoke. long ago, I think about 5, 6 years ago, during actually maybe a little longer, there was this time when the Nigeria happened to you was actually something of a prayer. Something being pushed by people within the governance system. They wanted to make it cool to say Nigeria happened to you. And I found it offensive. I found it offensive because in the true sense of the word, something happening to you, the only thing Nigeria ever does when it happens to you is for evil, systemic evil to befall you. Policeman shoots you, the custom impound your car on the highway, government come and demolish your house because of some drainage, something or the other. Every intervention with government came with pain. So I started saying, may Nigeria not happen to me and you. It became my way of rebutting that simplistic and stupid assertion of fraudulent patriotism. Because how do you demand patriotism of me when you've denied me citizenship? So I started rejecting it. I'll be like, may Nigeria not happen to me and you. Nigeria happened to me. The only thing that then happened was that you did not allow Nigeria to fully bear its fangs and to complete the cycle of evil that has come to define Nigeria happening to you as a Nigerian. Nigeria has happened to way too many people, better human beings. I saw a few of them in prison. You want me to tell you about Elewure? Yeah, Elewure stole a goat. He's in Ado Ekiti prison. He stole a goat. Judge or magistrate asked him how much he sold the goat. He said 9,000. Was given 9 years imprisonment. He's in Ado Ekiti prison. You can go ask. So, in Nigeria not happen to me and you. In a country where billions are being stolen by men in their dotage who do not even need it. And we have found a catch-all phrase for those who steal with impunity. We call it corruption. But when a poor man commits a crime that approximates what the corrupt have done, you have all the right names for them. You charge them for advance fee fraud, you charge them for stealing, you charge them for altering. You have all the right names by which to charge them. It reminds me of when we were in the university. You catch a frat boy who has murdered people. Instead of charging him for murder, for gun running, for possession of firearms, you charge him with cultism. Because they're government protected, because they're used by government. So when government steals government money, it becomes corruption instead of stealing. It becomes corruption instead of advance fee fraud. It becomes corruption instead of altering. You have all kinds of big names by which to cover the crimes committed by those who are covered by the reign of impunity. So, I tell you, the only reason that Nigeria did not happen to me, at least the full-fledged of Nigeria, is because you spoke. If we are going to stop this evil that has befallen our country, it would also be because you found your voices as a collective. May Nigeria not happen to me and you, but we must happen to Nigeria. We must not lose our voices again, and we must speak to our collective pains and victimhood. Let us be clear. Let me be very, very clear. The only antidote to Nigeria happening to any one of us is for us as a collective to find our voices, to speak, yes, but to also act. As a collective, we must happen to Nigeria if Nigeria is not to happen to us and to our generations. If you doubt it, in fact, it's almost certain that you're a member of the middle class or were a member of what was a middle class or an aspiring member of the middle class if you're hearing or listening to me. The clearest evidence of the existential nature of the threat that you are facing is the complete annihilation of your class. Let me be clear. If you are unaware, let me remind you. What is called the middle class in every other country in the world is capable of purchasing new cars. How many of you, except those who have run away from Nigeria, can actually buy a new car, regardless of whatever profession you are ensconced in, unless you're stealing from the covers of government? Your class is already gone. Is a class already evaporating. Your continuing silence dooms you. And the sooner you learn to open your mouth, the better for you, because it also dooms your children. Open your mouth. Nigeria did not happen to me because you spoke. It will stop happening to all of us if you keep speaking.